The paper sliced my fingertip as I pulled the letter from the mailbox, but that sting was nothing compared to the burn in my chest as I read the words inside. After review of community boundaries, your back acre has been reclassified as common property. My vision blurred. I read it again, heart pounding, fingers trembling. That acre had been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather taught me how to fish in the creek running along its edge. My father built my first treehouse in the old oak that still stood proud in the corner. Now it was gone, stolen with the stroke of a pen and the arrogance of a signature. I didn't waste a second. I marched straight to Karen Winter's house, my boots crunching down the perfectly trimmed sidewalk like a war drum. Her front yard was immaculate, of course. Hydrangeas blooming unnaturally large, lawn so green it almost glistened. I pounded on her door hard enough to make the glass panels rattle. She answered in sleek workout gear, her smile practiced and brittle. "Can I help you, David?" "This letter says you're taking my land," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "There must be some mistake." Karen's smile tightened, never reaching her cold, calculating eyes. "No mistake. Our professional survey shows your grandfather's hand-drawn maps were incorrect. The board voted unanimously last night." "Without telling me?" I hissed. Her eyes flicked to her watch as though I were wasting her time. The HOA bylaws don't require notification for boundary corrections. We're planning a wonderful resort-style pool there. Everyone will benefit. Even you. Before I could argue, loud music erupted from the next yard over. Karen's smile turned genuine. "I should go. Brad and Tiffany Morgan are hosting the neighborhood welcome party. You should come. It might help you adjust to the changes." I clenched my fists, turning away, the music growing louder with each step home. Through the fence, I saw Brad and Tiffany clinking champagne glasses by their brand new pool, suspiciously close to what I now knew was still my land. Their laughter rang out like mockery. That night, the bass thumped through the walls until nearly 2 a.m. I knocked on their door, heart pounding, and Brad answered with a beer in hand, eyes glassy. "Hey man, party's over. It's almost 2 o'clock. Some of us work tomorrow." Tiffany appeared behind him with a smirk. "We stopped the music right at 1. HOA bylaws." My jaw tightened. "Did you know about this plan for my back acre?" Their guilty silence told me everything. Back home, sleep wouldn't come. My mind churned with questions, fury tangled with confusion. I found myself in the attic before dawn, pulling out my grandfather's old wooden chest. The smell of cedar and age filled the small space as I opened it and carefully unfolded the yellowed parchment maps and deeds he'd guarded for decades. Under the kitchen lamp, I spread them out next to the HOA's glossy survey Karen had smugly attached to her letter. Her map drew straight, convenient lines that sliced off my back acre like a butcher's knife. But Grandpa's maps told a different story, boundaries that followed the natural landmarks, the bend in the creek, the rocky ridge line, the great oak. There, scribbled in the margin in my grandfather's tidy handwriting, was something I'd never noticed. "See county markers placed 1952. My pulse quickened. If those markers were still out there, I could prove the HOA's survey was a lie. I needed help. My hands shook as I scrolled through my phone in the dim light, stopping on the name Jack Carter, an old friend of my father's and one of the most honest surveyors I'd ever known. It was nearly 4 a.m., but I texted him anyway, "Emergency. Need your help." I couldn't sit still. At sunrise, I called in sick to work and drove straight to the county records office. My cousin, Eddie Collins, met me there, already sipping his 3rd coffee of the morning. "These HOA people," he muttered, flipping through dusty files with me. "They've been getting bolder every year." After 2 hours of digging, we found it, the 1952 official survey. My property lines extended even farther than Grandpa's map showed, and the creek's shift after the flood of '78 didn't legally change anything. My back acre wasn't just mine, it was bigger than I thought. As we sat there, Eddie's expression darkened. "David, you need to see this." He slid a folder across the table. Financial disclosures from the HOA. Karen had established something called the Pine Crest Beautification Fund last year, supposedly for neighborhood projects. But over $50,000 had been withdrawn and transferred into a shell company tied to her husband's business account. I felt my stomach turn. Driving home, I passed the Morgan house again. Workers were unloading another set of massive speakers by their pool, gearing up for yet another party. Brad waved at me like we were old friends. I didn't wave back. That afternoon, Jack pulled into my driveway in an unmarked truck, equipment hidden under tarps. "If those markers are still there," he whispered, "Karen has a serious problem." We worked in silence until sunset, moving carefully through tall grass and brambles to avoid being seen. The first metal detector beep had my heart racing. Jack knelt and uncovered a rusted metal post buried deep under decades of growth. He double-checked the coordinates. His eyebrows shot up. "According to this, your property extends another 50 feet, right into the Morgan's backyard." We found 3 more markers before dark. Each confirmed what I'd suspected. But there was more. Jack crouched by the rocky ridge line and ran his fingers across the stones. "You see this? The Geological Survey from the '50s lists this area as a potential archaeological site. Native American artifacts were reported here in the '40s. I blinked, remembering Grandpa's stories about arrowheads and pottery fragments he'd found. I'd thought they were just campfire tales. What does that mean, legally? If confirmed, Jack said quietly, it could trigger a historical preservation order. No development. At all. As if on cue, the bass from the Morgan's party boomed across the fence. I smiled in the dark. Let them enjoy it while they could. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a notification from the Neighborhood Watch app. An anonymous complaint had been filed against me for property vandalism and threatening behavior toward HOA officials. My heart sank. I walked out to the front yard and stopped cold. Someone had dumped 2 HOA signs on my lawn, spray-painted with crude insults, making it look like I'd vandalized them. My phone buzzed again, a text from Maggie across the street. "I have footage from my security camera. Don't worry. I've got you covered." But the next message made my blood run cold. "Contractors arriving 7 a.m. tomorrow at your back acre. Bulldozer confirmed." They're not waiting. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. and didn't sleep a minute. The first rumble of heavy machinery woke me before the alarm ever had a chance. My heart pounded as I scrambled to the window and saw it, a yellow bulldozer creeping toward my back acre, its headlights cutting sharp beams through the early morning mist. The ground trembled under its weight. My chest tightened as I grabbed my phone, flashlight, and the folder with my grandfather's deeds. I shoved my feet into boots and sprinted outside, the cold wet grass soaking through to my skin. "Stop!" I shouted, waving my flashlight wildly. The bulldozer's engine groaned to a halt, and the operator, an exhausted-looking man in a hard hat, stepped down, squinting at me. "Look, buddy, I'm just following orders," he said, holding up a folded document. HOA authorization. Signed by Karen Winters herself. "That's invalid," I said through gritted teeth, holding up my own paperwork. "My property markers are documented by the county. You're trespassing." Bright headlights swung across the yard, followed by the crunch of gravel as Karen's white luxury SUV pulled in like royalty arriving for a coronation. Brad and Tiffany Morgan were right behind her, along with 2 unfamiliar men in expensive suits. Karen stepped out, perfectly composed in a cream blazer and heels far too delicate for muddy ground. "Good morning, David," she cooed, voice sugar-sweet but full of venom. I see you're an early riser. Perfect timing, you can witness the groundbreaking of Pinecrest's newest community feature. I already called Sheriff Miller, I said, not bothering to hide the steel in my voice. He'll be here any minute. Karen's smile twitched. Actually, we're fully compliant. According to this revised survey, this land is part of common property. We're being generous, offering you a compensation package. Tyler Morgan, Brad's younger brother, who I hadn't seen involved until now, snickered behind her. Time to join the winning team, Jackson. I stood my ground, the weight of my family's legacy pressing heavy in my chest. I filed for an emergency injunction yesterday, I said evenly. This land isn't yours to take. Her perfectly plucked eyebrows rose just slightly before she turned to one of the men in suits. Harold, call Judge Watkins. Wake him if necessary. Before the first call could connect, the distant wail of a siren cut through the thick morning air. A few moments later, Sheriff Hank Miller's patrol car rolled into view. He stepped out, looking more irritated than concerned. What's going on here, folks? Karen, ever the diplomat, stepped forward with an outstretched hand. Just a small misunderstanding, Sheriff. Hank didn't shake her hand. Do you have permits for pre-7 a.m. construction? Karen blinked. HOA authorization suffices. That's not what I asked, Hank cut her off. County law. No construction before 7. No exceptions. Where are your posted permits? Her smile faltered. They're being processed. While they argued, I noticed movement along the property line. Brad was pacing, on the phone, glancing nervously between the bulldozer and the marked property stakes Jack and I had placed. Sheriff Miller turned back to me. You holding up okay, David? I nodded, but I felt the weight of fighting giants on my shoulders. Just then, Maggie appeared from across the street, carrying a stack of yellowed papers. She walked straight into the center of the chaos. Karen, she called out, her voice surprisingly firm. You might want to review these. Karen barely spared her a glance. Not now, Maggie. Ignoring her, Maggie handed the papers to me. Original HOA meeting minutes from 1989, she said, her eyes locking on Karen's. We've dealt with these land grabs before. Before anyone could respond, a ripple of whispers spread among the gathered neighbors. People had begun to cluster at the edges of my property, phones out, recording every moment. And then the bombshell hit. Jack called me from the county office. David, you're not going to believe this, he said breathlessly. The so-called community resort Karen's been pushing? It's not a community amenity at all. It's a private club. Membership only, with dues starting at $5,000 a year. Most of the board knew. I felt my stomach turn. I ended the call and turned to the crowd, raising my voice. She's building a private club. For profit. Not for us. Gasps erupted. A neighbor shouted, "Is that true, Karen?" Karen paled. That's ridiculous. But before she could spin another lie, Eddie texted, David, they plan to bulldoze the old chapel foundation. It's on the blueprints. A tiki bar. I looked up from my phone, my blood running cold. The old chapel. A place where my parents were married. Sheriff Miller turned to Karen, eyes dark. You need to pack up and leave, ma'am. Now. The bulldozer operator didn't wait for permission. He cut the engine and climbed down, already walking back to his truck. The crowd's whispers turned into shouts. Neighbors who had smiled at Karen days before now glared with open fury. Karen's mask cracked as she spun on her heel and stormed back to her SUV, tires kicking up gravel as she peeled out. But I knew this wasn't over. She would come back. And next time, she'd come with sharper knives. The sun had barely set when my phone buzzed with the message I'd been expecting. Emergency HOA meeting, 7 a.m. tomorrow, all board members required. Code red. Karen wasn't retreating, she was regrouping. She'd been caught, cornered, embarrassed in front of the entire neighborhood, and now she was preparing her counterattack. I spent the night hunched over my kitchen table with Jack and Eddie, piecing together everything we'd found. Maps, financial statements, shell company documents, contractor emails, and the latest blueprints Eddie had uncovered. Each document told a story of greed, deception, and blatant disregard for law and community trust. The piece de resistance was sitting in a small plastic evidence bag on the table, arrowheads and pottery shards, dated and catalogued, proof that the land Karen tried to steal wasn't just mine, it was historically protected. But I knew facts alone wouldn't win. I needed to hit them where it hurt, in front of the people they'd lied to, manipulated, and betrayed. At exactly 6:40 the next morning, I arrived at Ridge Community Center, briefcase in hand. Karen's assistant, a pale, anxious woman named Marcy, tried to block me at the doors. "The meeting's already underway, sir." I looked her dead in the eye. "Not without me, it's not." Inside, the room was packed with over 100 residents. Some I'd known for decades, others new arrivals lured by Karen's polished brochures and empty promises. The murmur of conversation fell to silence as I walked down the center aisle. At the podium, Karen's crimson blazer matched the defiance in her eyes. "As I was saying," she continued, "before this interruption, the vote to invoke our Community Enhancement Clause requires a 2/3 majority." I raised my voice, cutting through the room. "Before anyone votes, they should know exactly what they're voting on." Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd. Karen's fingers whitened around the microphone. "Mr. Jackson, you are out of order. We follow Robert's rules here." "Funny you should mention rules," I said, placing my briefcase on the table and opening it slowly, "because I've spent the last 48 hours discovering exactly how many you've broken." Board member Diana Collins, who had always seemed fair despite her friendship with Karen, leaned forward. "I move we grant Mr. Jackson 10 minutes to speak." "Seconded," came voices from the crowd. Karen's smile faltered but she nodded tightly. 10 minutes. I rolled out 3 large maps. The first was my grandfather's original 1952 survey showing property boundaries marked by natural features. The second was the county's current legal record, highlighting my land in bright red. The third was the HOA's fraudulent survey, straight lines drawn through what had been recorded historical markers. "Your survey," I said evenly, ignoring Karen's growing discomfort, "was conducted by your brother-in-law's company, a clear conflict of interest I've already reported to the state licensing board." I clicked the projector remote, and the room fell silent as screenshots of emails appeared on the screen, conversations between Karen, Brad Morgan, and a handful of board members discussing how to forge documents, apply pressure, and fabricate complaints against me. Someone in the back gasped. "But it gets worse," I continued. "According to county records, 3 months ago Karen and her husband formed an LLC, Ridgeline Development Partners. 2 weeks later, that LLC purchased land adjacent to my property. Plans filed show the so-called community resort was never meant for public use. It's a private club, membership only, with an entry fee of $5,000. The room erupted into shocked voices. "That's a lie." Karen snapped, her composure crumbling. "I'm not done." I pointed to the screen as blueprints loaded, showing a tiki bar stamped directly over the location of the old community chapel foundation. I paused, letting the weight of that sacrilege settle into the room. The place where many of their parents, grandparents, and even neighbors had been married, wiped out for a cocktail lounge. Diana Collins stood. "I move that all votes be suspended, and an immediate investigation into these allegations begins." "Seconded," shouted multiple voices. Karen banged her gavel so hard the head cracked off. "You can't do this!" she shrieked. "We have contracts. Investors are waiting." That was her final mistake. "What investors, Karen?" Frank Harris demanded. "The board never approved any contracts." All eyes turned to her as panic twisted her face. Brad Morgan slipped out the side door, phone pressed to his ear. Karen saw him leave and turned on me one last time, her voice shaking. "This isn't over, Jackson." I smiled calmly. "No, Karen. For you, it just is." The days that followed felt surreal. Karen vanished from the public eye, but her absence spoke louder than any speech she could have given. Her luxury SUV disappeared from her driveway, replaced by a discreet for sale sign half hidden behind trimmed hedges. Word spread fast. The board had not only suspended her indefinitely but also filed an official complaint with the state. Meanwhile, the county tax assessor's report arrived in my mailbox with poetic timing. Karen's property value had jumped by 40% thanks to her illegal home expansion that crossed onto my land, and the Morgans' pool had netted them a hefty tax penalty of their own. My taxes, however, remained blissfully untouched thanks to the new historical preservation designation Jack and Maggie had helped secure. But the battle wasn't quite over. One afternoon, as I was sorting through paperwork on my porch, a black sedan rolled up. Brad Morgan stepped out, looking nothing like the smug neighbor who once laughed over beers by his pool. He was pale, his shoulders hunched in defeat. He handed me a USB drive without a word. Inside were more damning emails, blueprints, and secret agreements Karen had brokered, and plans for a second, much larger development that would have swallowed not only my land but Maggie's property too. Brad's voice cracked as he confessed that after Karen's fall, they realized they'd been used as pawns and left to bear the consequences alone. The neighborhood slowly began to heal. The new leisure center broke ground on proper community land near the entrance, and peace returned. At the next HOA meeting, I was voted chairman of the newly formed Property Rights Committee, and Maggie handed me a bottle of champagne on my porch that evening, her eyes shining with pride. We toasted to patience, legacy, and the quiet victory of truth. But as I watched Karen's empty house fade into shadow and the faint glint of taillights disappearing down the road, I couldn't help but wonder if she was truly gone, or simply waiting for her next opportunity. After all, someone like Karen never really quits, they just look for another angle. Have you ever felt powerless against HOA, or Karen, rules? Share your experiences below, let's see who had it worse.